even if you're talking about a few hundred extra dollars a month, that's real money.
I'm Queen City News Chief Business Correspondent Taylor Young, and the majority of my job is talking about money. So we are going to be bringing real people, into our studio and talking about the interesting ways that they are making ends meet. We're talking side hustles, the pros, the cons, and what got people into doing them. But first, we're going to dive into the economics of side hustles, the numbers. And there's no better person to talk about this than LendingTree's Chief Consumer Finance Analyst, Matt Schulz. Thank you so much for being here, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
So I know that you recently published the 2025 Side Hustle Survey. It was really eye-opening.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that a lot of people have side hustles right now, and maybe the most troubling aspect of the whole report is that more than half of people with a side hustle say that life just wouldn't be affordable without it.
Yeah, really eye-opening for the state of just the financial, situation for a lot of Americans out there. And before we get into more of the numbers, just kind of explain what you deem a side hustle.
Well, really, we pretty much left it open to people to kind of say what they thought was a side hustle. It's really anything that brings in extra income beyond your primary source of income, and it can be everything from mowing lawns to selling stuff on Etsy or anything down the line. So we left it pretty open.
Yeah, and I know in that survey, you found that 2 in 5 Americans now have a side hustle. Was that kind of surprising to you? I didn't realize how many people had a side hustle.
It wasn't particularly surprising to me because it's actually down a little bit from a few years ago. Because I think, at least in our numbers, the side hustles kind of peaked right as the pandemic was kind of wrapping up, where you had a lot of people with a little bit of extra money in their pocket and some extra time. So a lot of people kind of chose to dive into side hustles. And at least in terms of our numbers, it peaked a couple of years ago. But still, the fact that almost 40% of people have a side hustle today is you're right. It's pretty eye-opening. And again, the even more eye-opening is the fact that these aren't things that are just being done because of people's passion and that sort of thing. It's it's about being able to make ends meet for the most part.
Yeah, I believe the number was around 68% of the people who reported having a side hustle said that they need this in order to pay their bills. Were there other reasons for why people were kind of taking on these extra jobs outside of their 9 to 5 job?
Well, really, a lot of it just came down to wanting to have extra flexibility and extra wiggle room. I mean, a lot of what people said would get cut out of their lives or reduced dramatically were things like dining out and travel and those sorts of things. And while those aren't the basic essentials of life like groceries and utility bills and that sort of thing, those are the things that kind of make life fun, right? So the fact that so many people have to have side hustles in order to keep doing those sorts of things to the degree they want to is an eye opener.
And you also dove into the demographics of the people who work these side jobs. And I found those also to be really interesting. I mean, just starting with age, it looks like Gen Z is really kind of knocking it out of the park in terms of working those extra jobs. Just thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that Gen Z and younger millennials have absolutely embraced side hustles and the entrepreneurial side of things. And I think some of it comes from coming of age, being very young and seeing what their parents might have gone through in the Great Recession. then seeing all of the upheaval during the pandemic, and just understanding that there's a lot of risk involved if your only source of income is one job, because that job can go away. And we've seen so many times over the years. So I think in a similar way to where my grandmother and the depression generation was informed for their entire lives by what they went through when they were young in the depression. I think there's a lot to be said for the fact that that Gen Z in particular has kind of had a similar experience in their youth, and is doing what they can to kind of hedge their bets a little bit.
And I know we also got in this survey into kind of the gender aspect of this. It did look like men were more likely, just a little bit more likely to have a side hustle over women, but also kind of looking at the income base of the people that are working these side hustles. I actually found that to be the most surprising out of all of this. The more money you brought in for your income, the more likely you were to work a side hustle.
Yeah, yeah. And honestly, some of it is that it takes money to make money, right? So the more income you have, the more freedom you have to start a side hustle, to start a little small business or that sort of thing. So that kind of makes it a little easier to get started with these sort of things. And then some of it is also just the fact that people have these side hustles pushes them higher up the income ladder. So I think it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy there.
Yeah, I also know just from my previous reporting that there's also this, the lifestyle creep. Just because you make more money, you think that you can spend more. They're kind of getting to that point and realizing, okay, maybe I need to work a side job in order to kind of continue to afford my life. So that was really interesting to me. I think one of the other big questions too is how profitable are these side hustles? I know that I'm sure, vary greatly depending on what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. What we found was that the average what we found was that the average amount of income that people brought in for these side hustles was about $1,200 a month. And the median was lower than that, so it can obviously be very, very skewed. But if you're talking about a few hundred extra dollars a month, that's real money when you consider how tight most people's financial when you consider how tight most people's budgets are and how little financial wiggle room people tend to have. And there is and it certainly does vary. It can vary depending on how much time you put in, how much in money you invest up front, what you're selling on down the line. But the truth is that a fair amount of people are making significant money with their side hustles, and it's a big deal. It's important to understand that not everybody makes a ton of money on these side hustles, and they are generally not passive income. They take work, and it takes a while to build up that income and to get that cash flowing. But if you do it right and you have a little bit of luck and a little bit of planning, you absolutely can you can make a significant difference in your financial life with these side hustles.
Yeah, and I'd also be really interested to know on, how many people were so successful in their side hustle that they actually made it their full-time job. I don't know if you have any information on that or not.
We don't have information on that, but there's no question that that happens. I mean, we've see on social media people talking about how they started their side hustle and left their 9 to 5, and now they're a digital nomad traveling the world and that sort of thing. And
Sounds wonderful.
obviously those are kind of extreme examples, right? But there is no question that happens sometimes. But it is really, really important for people to kind of know themselves when they're getting into these side hustles and kind of what their goals are and what they're looking for. because it's one thing if you're diving into a passion that you would like to someday make your full-time job, that requires a different level of investment in a few different ways to kind of move that direction. Or if you're somebody who just wants to save up a little bit of extra money or make your life a little bit easier, or make it a little easier for you to make ends meet, then you can kind of adjust your expectations, your effort, and that sort of thing accordingly.
And I'm sure even though I'm sure a lot of these side hustles kind of start as a passion project, but I find it fascinating how many people, when asked in this survey, would you continue doing this side hustle if you didn't need the extra money? And the majority of people, it sounds like, said that they would prefer not to have to do them.
Yeah, as much glamour as there can be in being your own boss and having side hustles and being an entrepreneur and all that sort of thing, most of us, I think, would prefer to have a steady paycheck that they can rely on. And unfortunately, for so many people, that's just not the case. Or if they're e- even if they are getting a steady paycheck, maybe they don't feel that secure in that job. So the truth is that a lot of people are doing these side hustles because they have to, more so than because they want to.
Great. And over the course of the show, we're going to be interviewing people with side hustles, kind of learning the pros and cons. And, a lot of these side hustles, I mean, I haven't even heard of them before. I mean, we're talking streamers. We're going to be speaking with OnlyFans creators, Uber drivers. I mean, the list goes on. What are some of the most popular side hustles that you found that people are partaking in?
Yeah, they're literally anything you can think of can be a side hustle. But what we found that a lot of the most common things are things like food delivery and Uber driving, like you were saying, and things like the jobs we used to do when when we were kids, like mowing lawns and basic kind of services like that. So it is really true that almost anything can be a side hustle. And one of the real keys to doing a successful side hustle is is kind of playing off of your own strength. So if you are somebody who has one type of job, but you're really good at numbers and you want to help your friends do their taxes or manage their budget or something like that, even that sort of service can be a side hustle. And there's any number of things like that. So there really is a world of opportunity out there if you're willing to jump on it.
And then my last question, and I didn't mean to skip over this earlier, but when we were talking about the demographics, it showed that men were more likely to have a side hustle compared to women. Was there any indication of why that might be?
There wasn't really any indication of why necessarily, but what we have seen over time is that oftentimes women may be a little more cautious when it comes to financial steps, and oftentimes that's a really good thing. It might mean that they save more. It might mean that they are a little less a little more risk averse, because for any number of reasons. But yeah, it's when we saw these numbers that men were a little more likely to jump in, I wasn't all that surprised by that.
All right. Well, yeah, Matt, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. All of this is extremely fascinating. So I thank you again.
Thank you. This was fun. I appreciate you having me.
You've been watching Side Hustles on Queen City News Plus. We'll see you next time. Taylor Young from Queen City News here. If you enjoyed watching this content, be sure to download and watch our full series of Queen City News Plus originals on our app. You can find Queen City News Plus using your streaming devices, including Roku, Amazon Fire Stick, and Apple TV. Just search the name Queen City News Plus. Your support will help us continue our series. Thanks for watching.